Welcome to today's webinar on our 2017 Handrail Enhancements. My name is Laura Hackle, and I will be covering the new Add Flat Rail, tools that will make editing handrail more proficient, enhancements, and fixed PRs regarding the handrail. You can type in your questions as the webinar goes on, and I'll answer them at the end. If I don't know the answer, then I'll make sure I research it and email you the answer. We now have a new flyout for the handrail. We'll start covering these tools as the webinar goes on. You can still use the handrail add command located in the member add. You can use these tools on existing handrail or handrail that is not used in the add flat rail tool. So here over on the right hand side would be our new flyout. I'll start covering these. We have the add flat rail, adjust returns, adjust splice, splice handrail, and adjust posts. If you have your own toolbar, you can find this in my options, toolbar configuration. The command group will be model -- parametric. And then here's all the tools listed individually. But if you want the flyout, it's handrail tools. And you could just drag that off to your toolbar. The first one I'm going to cover is the add flat rail. This currently only works for flat handrail. You can think of this tool as the quick add for handrail, which is similar to the stair quick add. I'm going to pick multiple points to add my handrail, but once it is complete, they will be separate handrail members just like the stairs. The add flat rail allows the user to quickly and efficiently locate the path of the handrail. Then you can come back and make modifications as needed for the individual handrail. So my first one I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a handrail in here. So I'll do the add flat rail, locate my first point, and I'm going to just go 100 foot. We'll come back to the offsets later on, but since I don't have it going to anything or offsetting from anything, I'll just leave at 0 and I'll leave on prompt again, which I'll come back to. Click OK. Now I could pick my second point. So that first one I did was my first run. The direction is going to affect the offset as well. So it affect the near side and far side. And it'll also affect how you look at the handrail when it's detailed. If I go in a counterclockwise direction, it'll offset towards me or to the outside for a positive direction. If I go clockwise, it will offset away from me or towards the inside for a positive direction. Right now for this one, it doesn't really matter as I go around, but once I get to my other examples, it will affect the outcome. So I'm done here, so I just wanted to add a straight one, so I'll right click to return out of it. Now you will see the new add flat rail window that pops up. I'm going to come back to these in detail, but it will detail or will splice these. So for my rail constraints, my maximum rail length, so it's going to splice these at 20-foot increments. I have my minimum splice clearance and my maximum splice clearance. So that will be the clearance there for what a post will go to during that splice. I have return lengths at 9 inches, which I'll come back to later on. I have my maximum post spacing at 4'2". I have my start end. And I also have my finish end. We have our walk side. I'll go ahead and leave that as a toe plate. We have our top rail, mid rail. My connection, my type, I'm just going to leave at welded. And I'll click OK. So if I rotate out here, you'll see now it has broken those off into separate handrails at the 20-foot splice. Then I could come back and just edit just one of those if I wanted to. Then that's just the handrail edit screen. And we have our left end and our right end to set at splice, because it broke them off in the 20-foot increments there. That add flat rail window that popped up, that's reading from a default setup. So if I go to my options pull down, job options, plugin options, and then there's member, I have my handrail here. So this is just for the add flat rail window. It is not for the regular handrail. So I have my general settings. So by default, when I add something in, it's going to automatically add it as a toe plate. My top rail, by default, it's reading from a pipe. And then if I expand these, for my pipe, by default, it's reading for this section size. I can change that when I go ahead and add that in for the add flat rail. You can always change these. If I wanted to drop that down and change it off of a pipe in the actual add flat rail screen, and maybe I changed it to an angle, by default, it would read from this angle section size. So all these can be modified and changed. This is just going to be the default setup that it's reading. We can close in a handrail as well. So I'm just going to turn this to stick. Do my add flat rail again. I'm going to pick my points. So my first point, I'm going to be going in a clockwise direction because I want the clip angles to be on the interior. So this is my first run. So my left to my right. This will be my first run. My offset is going to be at 4.5. So I want it to offset towards the interior at 4.5. I can leave this prompt again. This would be if you have different section sizes for your beams. So if I click OK, this would be my second run. It would pop this up again. I'm just going to turn this off and close this in. So here we have our maximum rail length again, our return length. I'm going to leave that at 9, which we'll come back to later on what that means. My maximum length if I only had one post rail. My maximum post spacing at 4'2". My start setback. So this would be at the point that I picked for my start. So like my left end, for example. If I want to set that back like maybe a foot, then I could put that in here. I'll come to that later on in a couple of more examples. My start end is just going to be a slice since it's enclosed. My start end for my first intermediate, 1'9", so to my first post. We have the same for our finish setback, so if I wanted to set that back a foot maybe. My finish end, and then my finish to first intermediate. I have my walk side. I'll just change that to far side. I'll have a toe plate in there. The style, I could put mesh or pickets if I wanted to, or galvanized. We have our top rail, mid rail, my connection. I'm going to change this to a clip angle. Now for clip angle, in the material information, you do have an option for your long leg too if you want it to be attached to the supported or the supporting. So I'll just click OK. And I'll rotate out. And now you can see, since I went in the clockwise direction, it offset towards my interior for my positive direction. Another thing that you'll see right now, the splice material is always going to be attached to the right end. This is hard-coded, but there is a request to have it be attached to the left end as well. So I'm just going to delete these to show another example. I'm going to open up my ISO view. So if I wanted to, I'm just going to turn this to stick, but I don't necessarily need to add that in a plan view. So I'm going to add this, add flat rail again. I have it at exact point. I turn this to stick so I make sure that I get the ends. So I'm going to pick this for my first end, or my first run. I'm going to now be going in that counterclockwise because I want to offset it towards the exterior or away from me. So that's my first run. I'll put at 4.5. I want to make these all at 4.5, so I'm just going to turn this off. Here's my second run. And I'm just going to go around this perimeter. And I'm just going to stop right here and right click. So my maximum rail length, all of this is fine. So my start end, I'm going to turn that to a P end. And then my finish end, I do want to be at a splice because I'm going to pick up where I left off. So as you can see, it added those all in there. And now they're all separate handrails. And as they went around the curve, they have a return length of 9 inches, which I'll get back to. And they became separate handrails. I'm going to finish this off. So I'm going to turn it back to stick, add my flat rail. That's my first run, 4.5. Oops. And then I'm going to come to where this intersects the beam's end and where it intersects with the column. So I'm finished. Here for my start end, I'm going to change that to a splice. My my finish end, I'm going to turn that to a P end, but my finish setback, I want it to set back from that column 1 foot. Another thing I'm going to do is just turn this type to a rectangular plate. And now for rectangular plate, we have extension plate information. So now it will extend that plate, or it will put a welded extension plate. And this would be if the rectangular plate is bolted to the support is off from a pipe or a tube post. So I'll click OK. You can see now it's spliced. And you'll also see that I picked at the intersection of the column and the beam, but it set it back 1 foot. And you also see that they're all separate members as well. Before I start with the other tools, I'm going to adjust a couple new enhancements that we have to help with my modeling practices. The first you'll see is when we had this to stick, now it shows, it's always shown the top rail, but now it shows the posts. We don't have the mid rails quite yet. Also, you'll see that when I did the setback, it actually set it back from there, and the stick line starts, or the member line starts, a foot away from that column. The next I'm going to go into is my display options. Now you'll see that my display options looks quite a bit different. I'll cover this in a later webinar, but the one thing that I'm going to come in and do is I have my member ends always displayed. And what I mean by that is you'll see these little rectangular boxes. Those are my member ends. I'm just going to turn that off so I don't select the wrong member end. Member ends are still there. They're just not going to show. It's called a member pen, which we'll cover later on in a different webinar. So I'm just going to turn this off and hit OK. And now you'll see those little boxes there are not always displayed, but if I highlight, you'll see that it's still there. Another enhancement we have is our selection filter. You can do by status display. So I have select members when any. I'm going to go to member status, member type, and then I'm going to scroll down so I only select my handrails. Click OK. So now, since it's by status display, if I select any of these, it's just going to show my handrail, or it's only going to select it. Like I stated above, that these tools that we're going to be covering can be used on an existing handrail, which I'll show in a upcoming example. And so they can be used if you don't use the flat rail add command. When we input the handrail, we go from the top of steel. When we edit with the tools, it goes from the top of the handrail. So we'll go from the top rail. Maybe in here, our first tool that we're going to play with is adjust returns. I can adjust multiple returns at once. But the first I'm going to do is I'm going to select this, and you'll see that it has a little return on it. It's the 9 inches that we put there. There's a tool over here that is adjust return. I'll select the little member end that the return is on. Right click OK, or I can do enter. And this pops up where I can either swap the return or I can change the return length as well. So what swap return will do is if you don't want it on this handrail, maybe I wanted the return to be on this handrail, the HR78. And then I could also change the return length. So by default, it was 9 inches. I could change that to 1'9". The first thing I'm going to do is just swap the return. So I'm going to leave the return length on there, but I'm going to switch which handrail it's going to be attached to. Now you will want to pay attention to up in your status line that you're still going to be in this command. So it says locate handrail returns, so I could come around and keep adjusting the returns. I'm done with this, so I can either right click OK or I can just cancel out of it. I'm just going to hit OK or enter. So now when I select this HR78, you'll see now the return is attached to this member. So another thing I can do, adjust return, select this handrail, right click OK. I could just leave it still on this handrail, but I'm going to adjust the return length. I'll just hit enter again. And now you'll see when I select it, it moved that return length 1'9". I can add in my own splices as well. So this is just one handrail. I can come in here and do add splice or splice handrail. I select the handrail that I want to splice, and then maybe I want to splice it right there. I could also type in, maybe I want to splice it at 10 foot. Now it is two separate handrails. I'm still in this command, so I'm just going to hit enter because that's all I want to splice. And now these are two separate handrails. Maybe I didn't want that splice there. So another command is adjust splice. I can locate my splice ends. So I made a little box around the two ends. Right click OK. And I'm going to move that back 10 foot. Now you can see it recombined that as one member. I'll just hit enter. And now that is one handrail. Maybe down here I have a piece of machinery that needs to get moved in. So I could just adjust splice and just do this one. Right click OK. And I want to move that down 4 foot 2. So now I can move that, and I could come in here and change my right end to a post. Change my left end to a post. So I could just adjust that. Now you see, once I did that, it kind of messed up and it affected my post spacing. So I'm going to open up my grid line 3 that this is on. And I want to adjust these post spacings. So here in the another tool we have is adjust posts. We have our maximum post spacing. I could leave that at 4 foot 2. I'm going to change this to 3 foot. My start end, so I can set back from a specific point, which is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to set back from this point right here. My start end to my first intermediate, I'll put 1 foot 9. My finish end can be a setback from a point. I'll just say okay. And I'll pick this point over here. And my finish end to first intermediate, I'll put 1 foot 9. Now, since these are two separate handrails, that's okay. It's just along a point. So I'll click OK. I'll select this point. Maybe I'll select that point. So I have the 3 foot maximum spacing there. And then from the point that I picked, the first intermediate was 1 foot 9. The second point I picked, it was 1 foot 9. I could just do it around a certain point, so I'll just open up another. So maybe only part of it I want to have a specific spacing of 3 foot. So I'll do 3 foot. My start end to first intermediate, sure, I'll have 1 foot 9. My setback, I'll put 0 here. So I could have it from here to, maybe I'll just put there. So only it's going to have 3 foot maximum spacing for those 2 points I picked, even though it's on the same handrail. If I was working with this and I only wanted to see my handrail, I can select it, right click, and I can do hide my unselected members. This is a new enhancement. So if I only wanted to see that, and then I can also add in, over on the left side here, we have add dimensions. And I can locate my point. So there's 1 foot 9. This was my maximum spacing as 3 foot. This was my maximum spacing of 4 foot 2. So if I only wanted to see my handrail, I could have selected it, right click, hide unselected members. I could hide this specific member. I'll come back to all this later on. Now that I'm done with it, I could hit show members. And then we also have the model dimensions that you can add. If you don't want to see those anymore, I can erase all my dimensions and they go away. Some new fixed PRs and enhancements that were added. You can change the piece mark, so I can double click on it and I could change this to 498, for example. I can add in a 4-bolt pattern to my base plates now, so I'll just go ahead. Let's go ahead and just add in a handrail here. From that to there. I don't want an offset. I only wanted a straight, so I can just right click. My start end, I'll have at a P end, and my start setback, since I picked at the intersection there, I'll put just 1'9". My finish setback for my right end, I'll put 1'9" as well, and another P end. I'm going to come down here and change this type to a base plate. Here, I'm going to change I have my images turned on. I'm going to change the width to 5 inches. My offset from holes, I'll turn to 1 inch. My rows, I'll put 2. And then the reference to hole along the width, so that'd be my O, I'm going to put -1.5. Click OK. So now you see it offset those back 1'9" from the points I picked. And I also have my 4-bolt base plate. We changed it so this vertical material that we have for the P end will now match what the top rail is instead of the post. So if I edit this and I change my top rail to 1.25, and I'm also going to change my mid rail to 1.25, and click OK. So since these are 1.25 and that's still 1.5, if I edit this, that is now 1.25. We have now that the toe plate connection can be welded to one member and field bolted to another. So here, let's rotate around. If I edit this this handrail, and I go into my ends, toe plate, you can have one just set to none, a plate or a hole. I'll just set this to none. And if I edit this handrail and go into my toe plate, this is a plate. The type is welded, so it'll be shop welded. And then it will be field bolted to the other. It does have the intelligence then to go ahead and put in the holes and bolts into the other toe plate. And since this all follows the pip standard, my type, I can have it be a pip slot, long, short slot, oversized round, or a standard round. Another thing is my row spacing. I can now have 2 rows as well. If I scroll out here, let's see a good one. So for our toe plate, for our joint information, my toe plate corner, I can have it be a square setback to what I have here. I could do a square flush, or it could have been the miter as what we had before. We can easily relocate the ends of the returns without having to remodel the handrail. So I'm going to go into my stair here. Now this is an example that I could have done the tools since this is an existing handrail and it wasn't used on the flat rail. So I'm just going to relocate this over 8.5 inches or so. So I can edit this. And my end information in my end, I can locate return. I'm going to go over 8.5 inches and hit OK. And there it moved over my post 8.5 inches without having to remodel. We also have our grab bar enhancements. So I can open up my handrail here. And then I go to my grab bar. Oh, sorry. My ends. Grab bar. And now instead of return to post, I could just set that to a plain end and have a setback there of maybe 8 inches. So that's going to move it towards the right. Oops, sorry. Okay. So it moved that over a setback in the positive direction, or if I did a negative, it could extend it out. Another one for our supports. So if I go to my grab bar, for my supports now, I have a centerline bend radius, which I'll come back to. My vertical offset, so that will be from the top rail there. Grab bar penetration, so if I want that to go into my grab bar. My orient relative to, I could do it to the rail or I could do it to the post. So now it can go along with the post. I'm going to rotate this around and edit this again and come back here for my centerline bend radius, and I'll just put in 2. And now if I wanted to, I could get that close to a 90-degree bend as well. For my angle handrail, so I'm just going to open up my angles. If I go to my posts and pickets, my post top rail setback, I can now set that back for angles as well. Not moved it down 1.5 inches. For the joint information, I have this, my top rail corner right now, it's set to a butt. My mid rail, maybe I'll set that to a miter just to show. And click OK. And now you can see that they have those two separate options there. I'm gonna go ahead and add in a angle handrail. So I'll just go to my bottom beam for my view. And I'm gonna do the flat rail or add flat rail. I'm gonna select intersection construction line. Pick my point over here. My offset, I am going to do 4.5. Oops, let me do that again. Four and a half. So you can see that it will remember the last handrail that you opened. So I opened an angle handrail, and down below it says my top rail overview is set to an angle, same with my mid rail, and my connection is set to an angle bracket. I'm going to go ahead, my start setback, I'll just put it at 9 inches with a P end. My start to my first intermediate post will be 1'9". My finish setback, 1'9" is okay since I went into the intersection of the beam and the column. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just hit OK here. So you see that I added those in. Well, maybe I actually wanted this post to be welded to my beam. So I'm going to go back to my view. And I'm going to move this. Move my actual handrail. So to move that, I want to know the distance that I need to, the dimension that I need to move it. So I'm just going to take my ruler. Here to there is 1 3/4, but I will need to add the thickness of the angle. So I'm going to select it, and since that's 1 3/4, I want to add the angle, which would be 1/4. So I want to move it actually 2 inches. So I'm going to right click, move stretch members, select this intersection construction line. I'll just go ahead and do intersection construction line again, or do 2 inches. So it moved it up. And you'll see that I got rid of that other angle that was up on the top. And it welded to that beam. Maybe I want this toe plate to be broken off. So I'll go to my model, member, break member apart, and just select my toe plate. So now it's its separate member. But I can still come back in here and edit that toe plate. So if I go here and do clip my top corner, same with this one, I could clip my top corner. Another thing that we also have is you can add a stabilizer angle there. So you could add a little angle to the beam in the toe plate. So I'm just going to clip these top corners. Now, even though it's broken apart, it still has the intelligence to clip those. Another thing is if I went here and I adjusted my posts, and I want it to be 8 foot, for example. My start setback, I'll go ahead and put that at 1'9", and my right, I'll make sure I have that at 1'9". And I'll do from here to here. Give it a second. I had to regenerate. And it has the intelligence that even though it's broken off, it updates that post spacing and where the holes and bolts need to go. So that concludes today's webinar on the new handrail enhancements. We have now covered the new Add Flat Rail, tools that will make editing handrail more proficient, enhancements and fixed PRs for the handrail.